we are to be the light out there in the world. So yeah, good point, Wendell. Yes.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like earlier in this lesson, we talked about God's desire for the Israelites to raise up children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren that were going to serve God. Or even to the comment you made a second ago, we kind of think to ourselves, this world that our children are growing up in today, I wouldn't want to raise kids in this. Kind of this notion, a lot of times we have this notion that that's something that I can't do. My kids are going to be facing something that they can't face. And I think in both of those cases, I know for me, I think about that call, generational faith. And I think that is beyond me.
Yeah.
I don't have the ability to make sure that my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren all are faithful. But God does. And I think so many times we maybe look at those things that God has said He desires, He wants, and we think about the ways that we fall short, the ways that we are not able to, the things that we're not able to do, and we forget all the things that He is.
Excellent point. God can do many things that we are not capable of. Very good. Anybody want to sum up any this lesson or any kind of thoughts or comments as we wrap it up? You want to say before we move on? All right. As I said a few classes ago, loving your spouse and choosing to raise your kids are not something I'm qualified to teach about. I wouldn't say I'm qualified to teach about serving either, but a little more in my wheelhouse than being an expert on children and marriages. So as we jump into lesson 9, you are destined for greatness. What is greatness as in the world standard? Fame, all right. These power. Anything else? Fortune, got a lot of money. Yep. Influence, very good. Looked up the definition. Things you all just said: the quality or state of being important, notable, or distinguished. The quality or state of being powerful or intense. The quality or state of being large in size, stature, and number. So that is the definition of greatness. This is defined by man. And there's nothing wrong with achieving success, is there? Nothing wrong with being powerful or I say large and in charge. There's nothing wrong with those things, but it's not how God defines greatness. As with most things, it just doesn't line up with man's definition. God wants us to conform to the image of His Son that we have in Romans 8:29. For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son in order that we might be the firstborn among many brothers. Author states that we don't see many servants around these days, and I kind of disagree with him there. There's a room full of people here who are servants and do a lot of serving and things we have no idea what goes on. A lot of these people in this room. So I get what he says in the culture. The grand scheme of things, we aren't. It doesn't seem as like it used to be. It seems impersonable. And I was talking to somebody the other day about how you just don't see people visiting anymore. Nobody just stops at your house. Of course, we don't want people just showing up. Sometimes that puts us a little on edge. But I remember my grandpa Jack. He had a tree out beside his house, and it was a shade tree, and he'd sit there a lot. And I mean, if somebody was driving down the road, they'd stop and just visit with him out under the shade tree. And we don't do that anymore. It doesn't seem to be like the culture of these days. The author states that we occupy a lot of space, but we have very little contact with others. We'll send hundreds and hundreds of text messages to people, but we have very little contact when we're just sitting across from them in a room. There's a meme or a joke that I'm sure you've seen floating around or that has similar to this idea. Why did you call me? This could have been handled in a text message. People don't want to talk to people anymore, Miss Carol. Hey, just send me a message. What's that?
I said
I'm in trouble. Yeah, me too. You know, I like to gab a little bit. So it's almost like we don't want to communicate sometimes. And we're not Christians. We're not immune to it. But this is one choice where we can have a huge impact on people. So, any thoughts about any things we discussed right from that point? If there's anything you want to say, just throw your hand up and we'll stop there. Matthew 20:28, if you want to turn there, we're going to be looking kind of the parallel of Mark 10:35-34, but it lines up similar somewhat to Matthew's account. This is James and John's mother. Mark says it's James and John making this request. They have this request to sit at the right and left hand of Jesus. What does that mean, the right and left hands, typically? What place is that reserved for?
2 and 3.
Yeah, places of honor. Yeah, places of honor. Places of what we consider greatness. Someone to be sitting there. He told them that he didn't know that they were asking. He said, "Can you go through what I am going through?" They said they could. He reassured them. He assured them that they would not. But the one who decides he's not the one who decides where someone sits in heaven. This, of course, made the other apostles mad. This was probably because of the request that they wanted to make themselves. After all, in Mark 9, 35, 33, and 35, someone want to turn there, if you don't mind, and we'll read that and we'll see why this upset them.
They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he began to question them. "What were you discussing on the way?" They kept silent, for on the way they had discussed with one another which of them was the greatest. Sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, "If anyone wants to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all."
Seems kind of silly to be arguing with something like this, isn't it? Who's the most important in the kingdom? We would never argue over someone who's greater, right? We'd never argue over someone who contributes the most money, right, Miss Carol? Or who has the most talent, or anything like that. It seems like if it's easy for the apostles to be trapped into this, would it be easy for us? Hands down. Yeah, absolutely. Jesus, go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
They were still looking at an earthly kingdom.
Sure. Yeah, I think they were still looking for the kingdom for a long, long time. Probably until the Holy Spirit came upon them, honestly. But yeah, they want to know who was the greatest. Any other thoughts? Jesus has a very important message to them, one that is very important for us as well. As Kyle read in 35, he sat down and called the 12 and said to them, "If anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all." And he took a child, put him in the midst of them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever receives a child such as this, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me." This is something I've never kind of heard of, but I want to get your thoughts on this. This is someone else's sermon. I'm just going to read from it. It says, "Then Jesus does something beautiful. He takes a child into his arms in the midst of his disciples." Just picture Jesus taking a child into his arms and teaching his disciples to receive such a child. The person of this sermon says we need to have the right cultural view of children to understand this message. Our cultural view, the Western culture, views children as innocent, vulnerable, gentle, and pure. This is not the ancient Near Eastern view of children. In their world, children were considered insignificant and without social status. Children cannot offer anything back. Doing something for a child means you're not going to get anything in return. Because of that, to welcome a child in that society was to break social norms. It meant to lower yourself to accept another lower status than you. Therefore, risking your own position and prestige, welcoming this child is an illustration of what it looks like to make yourself last of all people and servant to all people. Notice in 37 that Jesus says that receiving a child, you are receiving Jesus, and by receiving Jesus, you are receiving the Father. To receive Jesus means to receive lesser. We are to lower ourselves. We are not superior. We are not to make ourselves first. We are not to be a servant of self or even a servant of some. We are to be last of all and servant of all. This picture is that we would serve the weakest and least significant of Jesus' followers because that is truly serving Jesus. Jesus says that if we have truly received him in our lives, we will serve the least, we will serve the weakest, we will never consider ourselves superior, we will always lower ourselves and our hearts to serve all the people. I didn't know that about kids in that time frame. I don't know if anybody else has any viewpoints on that, but that kind of took me back a little bit. Had never heard that before, but interesting point of view. But Jesus is about to teach them what a disciple looks like as we go back to the text, what true greatness is. He talks about people of the world, those who have position, power, authority, how sometimes it can be abused. It is used for selfish purposes, personal gain. They use authority to get their way, oppress others. People desire it. We can become blinded by power, selfishness, ego, self-evaluation, and pride. He says, it shall not be among you, shall not be so among you. This isn't how someone who has put the new man on conducts himself. We don't act like this. We don't abuse authority. Leaders do not lead by force or fear. A disciple of Jesus leads by serving. He says, but whoever would be among you, whoever be great among you must be a servant, and whoever must be first among you must be a slave. Greatness is achieved through serving. Why?
Because we were to be Christ-like, and Christ was the ultimate servant.
That's exactly what he did. Right, Miss Carol? That's exactly what he did. Even as the Son of Man came not to serve, but to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. This is what Christ did. Yes, Kyle?
I agree with that,
Okay?
but why?
Uh-huh.
Why is service the mode by which greatness is achieved?
Okay. You're asking me? Oh, reverse it on me. Because you're lowering yourself, maybe?
I think that,
You got a different viewpoint?
no, I think that you're lowering yourself and you're being made empty.
Okay.
And when there's nothing left to block it, then God's light can shine the brightest.
Mhm.
And God is the greatest. So why is greatness achieved through serving? Because through serving, we can become the most transparent.
Mm-hmm.
The lower we are, the greater we can show who God is.
Excellent point. You're emptying yourself. That's good. You're emptying yourself of everything, ego, pride, all that. The Lord of all creation, didn't come compelling, didn't come forcing others to serve him. He came to serve us. Did Jesus come only to serve people who loved him and did good by him? No, it's not true. So, Jesus served the whole world and died for the whole world, even though the world despised and rejected him. Are there times that we qualify our service and giving of others by only giving ourselves to people who agree with us, who love us, who are nice to us, or are like us, or because we expect payback from them? They're going to do something in return to me if I do something good to them. We do not serve because someone serves us, does things right, or is good to us. We're called to serve our enemies, even to that point. We are called to serve and give our lives for others, a teachable moment for the apostles in this situation and ourselves. Any thoughts? I rambled on a lot there. You want to say anything? Got anything to add? No? To me, one of the greatest examples of a leader serving is Joshua. He led the children of Israel into those battles, conquered all those nations, and when they got to the point where they were dividing out the land up for inheritance, Joshua got his first, right? No, he did not. He did not. Leaders eat last. Read a little excerpt from a TED Talk. Says Joshua's reward for leading well didn't take place until after those he led were given their rewards. A recent TED Talk, Leaders Eat Last. He uses this military practice of mandating the frontline soldiers eat first, frontline leaders only eat after them, etc., etc., all the way up the line. When do generals eat? Only after everyone else. While this principle may seem to come from the U.S. military, it was actually thousands of years ago when this guy recorded this talk. Joshua didn't get his reward as a leader until after the people had got theirs, and that's Joshua 19, 49 and 50. When they had finished distributing the several territories of the land as inheritance, the people of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua the son of Nun. By command of the Lord, they gave him the city that he asked for, Timnath-Sherah, in the hill country of Ephraim, and rebuilt that city and settled in it. So he made sure everybody else got their territory before he got it. He asked for it, certainly, but he made sure everyone got theirs before he got his. Any thoughts, questions, comments, corrections? Yeah. Yeah.
Overdo each other, but it's on.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, not by stepping on them.
That's right.
Put yourself last. That's what you're talking about. Being that servant, putting others before you. That's how we do each other. Everybody in this building, city, state, whatever, we're doing that. Man, it'd be awesome.
Right.
Nothing but love and compassion and caring and concern, respect, and outdo each other in that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, be fantastic. There was Jessica and I watched a movie recently, not so long ago, and I had this quote from the Dalai Lama on it, and it's something that we thought that's fantastic. It says, our primary purpose in life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. So that's really good stuff to live by, I think. If you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. So good point, Sam. Anyone else? What greatness is not about. The author talks about status. The desire for position can overtake us, but it doesn't last long. Can we use status to serve people? If I'm a high-profile individual, can I? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of balance there for sure when desiring that kind of status, but I can use if I don't know, let's think of politicians, that's probably a bad example, but I can use that to serve in some way. Power, the same way. It's hard for egos to drop those egos. You know, sometimes we can use the phrase, "Do you know who I am?" You know, when talking about those. This is my parking place or my pew. You know, that steps on some toes a little bit here. But I can't believe they treated me like that. And how dare you threaten to question me when I'm bringing this up? Like positions, power can go to our head. But I think we can use that also in a way to serve people, you know, having the right attitude and emptying ourselves. Praise. Greatness is not about praise. So many Christians in the world use their talents, success to serve others. Well, there's nothing wrong with praising those people, Kyle. It can lead to something not so desirable attitudes. He brings up 1 Corinthians 4, 7, and then 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7. So let's read those. 1 Corinthians 4. I want to read 1 Corinthians 4, verse 7. Whenever you get there, please.
Who makes you differ from another? What do you have that you did not receive? Now, if you did indeed receive it, why do you boast as if you had not received it?
And then the follow-up to that, he mentions 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7. Please, if you don't care.
So we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us.
All glory belongs to God in those things, right? Thoughts?
I think it is good for us to share with others when they, rejoice with those who rejoice. And when someone's successful in life or in anything, it is good for us to pause and praise. But I think one way that we can do that is to praise them and how God has used them, or praise them and how they have used the things that God has given them. But keep the focus still on the Creator,
right,
on who it is that has made us who we are. Maybe that can help from, as the author talks, keeping it from getting stuck in the middle between our ears.
Right. And the reason I said Kyle's name, because Kyle and I have had many conversations about this. Praise makes me feel squishy, and he's like, well, you need to just, praise God for those things. So that's the reason I mentioned his name. So any thoughts about those things? Any other things you want to bring up? We're rolling through the serve lesson. Greatness is about serving. Catch up here. Paul thought of himself as a servant. He mentioned that several times. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 5, what then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. 1 Corinthians 1:1, Paul, a servant of Christ, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God. 1 Corinthians 9:19, for though I am free from all, I made myself a servant to all, that I may win more of them. We make ourselves a servant to all around us. We are to give ourselves away to others. The goal is not ourselves and not our rights or freedoms. The goal is the gospel. Paul wrote to Timothy. When he wrote to Timothy, what did he tell him to be? A servant. He said, I want you to be a servant. If you put these things before the brothers, you will be a good servant of Jesus Christ, being trained in the words of faith and all the good doctrine that you have followed. 2 Timothy 2:24, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. How awesome would it be if there's ever a book where we're mentioned in history that one of the characteristics that is mentioned about us is that we had servant hearts. He mentions a couple people in the scriptures, Romans 16, verse 1. I commend you, Sister Phoebe, a servant of the church of, can't say that word, Centria? Centria, is that it? Okay. Epaphras, in Colossians 4:12, Epaphras, who is one of you, a servant of Christ Jesus, greets you, always struggling on your behalf in his prayers, that you may stand mature, fully assured, all the will of God. Jesus talks about the humility of a child in Matthew 18, verse 1 through 4. Jesus' definition of someone great must be a servant, Matthew 20:26, which you already read in the text. Who is the greatest person in your church? We have many. We have many people who serve. We have many people who use their talents and their gifts to encourage. Romans 12:16 through 8. Having the gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in perpetuation to your faith, and if service, in our serving. Those who teaches, to the one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation. The one who contributes in his generosity, the one who leads with zeal, and the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. Also find it interesting, and Sam brought this up, in verse 10 of this chapter, we're encouraged to outdo one another in showing honor. And that Greek word, Sam, to your point, talks about valuable, being precious. To use those talents you've been given in what area you're gifted in, but to one-up each other, as Sam pointed out. It takes a lot of humility to show others how precious and valuable they are, because a lot of times we can get focused on how precious and valuable we are. I think part of being a servant is desiring to do that. Serving others is what Jesus came to do, even as the Son of Man came not to serve, to be served, but to serve. Many ways we can do this. Teaching classes, helping others to learn, visiting people. That could be people who are It says elderly, but there are other people we can visit, not just people who are in nursing homes. Lord's Supper preparation, cleaning and locking up the building, hospitality, notes of encouragement, paying attention. He talks about a frazzled young mom, offering a shoulder or an ear. It's these last two things that he brought up that kind of caught my eye. Paying attention, and I'm just as guilty as anyone about having tunnel vision. When we get in here, there's things on my mind, as I'm sure there are yours. But it's hard to see where you can serve if you don't have an awareness about us. Jason talks about this in his evangelism things he's been teaching us. Each one of us have raised kids. Moms notice these things more than dads. It's just their nature. They're awesome at it. And that situation, right, where you just had one of those days where things are just going south, and just everything goes wrong with kids, but especially moms, you know the look, right? You know the look of exhaustion. You know the look of frustration. Reach out, serve in that capacity. How can I serve you if I don't know how to serve you? Do I know what normal looks like for you? Like, are you normally jovial or normally, happy? But will I notice when things are different with you? Am I close enough to you where I notice when you're off? And how do I respond? Do I know you well enough or comfortable enough where I can say, hey, what's up? Tell me what's going on. Can we talk about this? Is there something you need? There are countless ways to serve others in that capacity. Any questions or comments or thoughts about those? Yes, Kyle.
Go through those and think about those things here. Just an hour or two, we're going to have a list of things read to us of people who need to be served.
Okay.
I think as we hear those, maybe just keeping in mind what we're talking about right now would be a really good thing for all of us. But two, I can't help but think about something I heard not too terribly long ago. In the book of Acts, you have recorded these really great moments of the church. Mm-hmm. And arguably the greatest evangelist and minister is Stephen. Uh-huh. And he sacrifices everything to say what needs to be said, to serve the Jews, to let them know the Word of God, and he gives his life for it. Mm-hmm. But just a couple chapters later, in chapter 9, that we read about a woman that we don't think about at all, Tabitha. Mm-hmm. And she is a servant as well. Yeah. And what's interesting is even though Peter is there, he's in Jerusalem, Stephen isn't raised from the dead. Yeah. But Tabitha is. Yeah. And Peter is not there, but they go and get him and say, the servant that was, you might look and go, okay, she wasn't doing what Stephen was doing. Yeah. But she's the one that was raised from the dead. I always find that striking. Yeah, that is. I think a lot of it had to do with the people that she influenced, right? I mean, because they were talking about her, weren't they, in that account? How, she did this and did that and stuff. That's excellent. Excellent point. Anyone else? Jesus provided an example in John 13:15. This is where he washes the feet of his disciples. For I have given you an example that you should also do this as I have done to you. Choose to serve. If serving someone we should ask before we do it? There's a question. Is serving someone something we should ask before we do it? Should I ask, hey, do you need anything? Or should I just say, hey, I'm bringing you this. I'm going to do this for you. What do y'all think about that?
Depends on how well you know the person.
That's right. That's right. How well do I know you where I can do these things? And how do we do that? How do we get to know people? Spending time with them, yeah. Yeah. We heard a lesson. We were visiting Jessica's dad a few months ago that said it's hard to know people 3 hours a week. The best way you can know somebody is by face-to-face across from a table. So something to keep in mind. Yes?
It might depend on the size, and it's not the right word, but maybe the way we think about it, the size of the service.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna just show up at your house, come in, wash the dishes, vacuum the floors, do your laundry, and not tell you that I'm coming to do that, just show up and do all this, someone might be a little bit put off by that.
Right.
Unless they know you really well.
Carol says, come on.
Bring it on.
My
Bring it
door's
on.
always open.
Come on.
So, if we know each other well enough, like Carol was saying, that may be welcome, or we may know whether or not this
Yeah.
isn't a good time for that. But even if we don't know each other very well, the smaller acts of service, Jesus talks about just a cup of cold water, things that we might take as insignificant.
Yeah.
Not even asking, hey, is it okay if I call you and chat for a little while? Is it okay if I pray for you? Just things that we might kind of say, that's not going to do a whole lot, can still do a whole lot. And I don't think, we really need to ask permission first to do those things. We just choose to do it. And since I keep waiting for Tim to bring it up and he's not, the work groups.
Yeah.
Great place
Yeah.
to do that.
He's not selling it, is he?
Well, we have so many opportunities to do things for people that we don't really know.
Yeah.
And even those small things can be a big, really big encouragement.
Yeah. Just something, it's said about, do you know who cleans a building and locks it up? I know who does those things. I know who used to do those things. You know what I mean? Just something simple as saying, hey, thanks for doing this. Or just, to your point, it doesn't have to be grandiose in nature. It can be something just simple and small. So, good stuff. Yes, sir.
Jesus washed the disciples' feet to show his humility
Uh-huh.
and his service. Did the church have this practice?
Did the church have foot washing practices? I'm not sure. That's the only place that I can think of where you read of it. I don't know, Wendell. I guess they were in houses and things like that. Probably something that they did, maybe. But I don't know if that's something that every church, so to speak, did. I'm not 100% sure. Anybody else got some thoughts on that? No?
I mean, you really gotta know somebody to wash the feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you do. You got to know somebody to wash their feet. And I just, what they wore back then and the culture and everything, I guess you got to take that into account too. They wore sandals and it was dusty and disgusting but that is a huge sign of act of humility. I'm not too good to wash your feet, so I don't know if that was a practice that every church did. I'll do some research and see, but if anybody has any insight on that, I would.
I figured if I didn't know, you probably didn't either.
Okay, no, it's okay. I need to be able to answer. Yes, Sam.
It may not be so much as feet being an issue as being aware of need.
Okay.
I'm walking around and my feet are hurting.
Yeah.
You know that, or during that time, it'd be a good thing if you would help me in that issue.
Right.
Clean my feet, help me out, let me get comfortable.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is today, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But just the thought in general that I was thinking, I don't see an issue in this building. I do see an issue in this country.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of being a servant seems really taboo in this area, in this nation. I mean, serving as a slave. Let's not talk about slaves.
Yeah.
That's too punchy.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad thing. Being a servant, being a slave is not a bad thing, depending on who you're in service to.
Right.
Because that's your protector, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you belong to them, and your allegiance is to them, and your master understands that, and they're protecting you.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we just need to do a better job of sharing that information to remove that taboo
Yeah.
of service. Not a bad thing.
Yeah. You catch all that?
Denominations, some
Yeah.
of them do have an annual or maybe semi-annual
Right. Yeah.
day set aside for church service, and that is part of it.
Yeah.
It's a highlight for them.
Sure.
I don't know if the church did it, and if they did, when did they stop doing it,
Yeah.
and why did they stop doing it?
Yeah.
And if they did it, why don't we do it?
Right. yeah.
You know, those questions are just tips in your mind.
No, yeah.
I'm not saying the answers come that easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Miss Natalie?
Different point of view of the serving is, on the opposite side, someone wanting to serve you
Uh-huh,
because you're in need, you have to let them.
right, oh, yeah.
And in turn, you give it to them by letting them
Mm-hmm.
doing that.
That's hard.
That's hard.
For me.
I'm saying it from.
Yeah, yeah, that's hard for me. That's something I struggle with.
But remember,
Yes, ma'am.
the giver,
Uh-huh.
the receiver are both glorifying God.
That's right. That's right. And that's what we're all about, right?
Yes.
Getting God the glory. Do you have something?
Say that for many of these congregations, it has become almost, maybe it's more like a ritual, or it's just a tradition that we have this foot washing service once a year.
Uh-huh.
That's not to say it's right or wrong, good or bad, just, it's something that is done, and, we did it for the year, and we maybe enjoyed it, it was very spiritual, it was very moving, but it's over. And that's not the implication of what Jesus, it's less to do with wash feet, and more to do with be the servant, be humble, look to the people around you and see them as more worthy than you, to have their feet washed, to have something done for them. And no matter what you have,
Mm-hmm.
you always have something you can do for somebody else.
So it's a consistent mindset attitude, not just a one-time thing. Does that help? Somewhat?
Just one more thought, I heard there's a bit of wisdom that was shared from a sister in this room.
Uh-huh.
Time about, if she asks, what can I do to help? Or wants to do something, let them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't prohibit them
Yeah,
from being a blessing in your life.
yeah. Don't be a blessing blocker. I've heard that many times from many people. Fun sponge. Fun sponge. That's could be another word for it. Don't be a fun sponge. Some people want to serve. Some people like serving. It's fun for them. So let them serve. So good stuff. I'll look up a little more about that, Wendell, and see where we get. Lord willing, Wednesday. Who's our standard for service? Who sets the example for how we serve each other? Christ. Christ is our example. Help the sick, encourage the hurting, wash feet if that's the thing. If they want you to wash their feet, wash their feet. Lower yourself. And there's many other things that we can do. The attitude and the mindset, I guess, is to choose to do this. Choose to be a servant. Choose to be someone who's willing to lower yourself, empty yourself to serve everyone, not just people who will serve you back, or maybe you can gain something from, but serve everyone equally. Your thoughts?
Brad, just one thought.
Yes.
The idea that if service is compared to greatness,
Yep.
service is the only thing that is ours.
Uh-huh.
Everything in the universe is God's.
Right.
We have nothing of our own except our service. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes it so great, is because it's the only thing that we can give. And if we give that, we've given all that we have to give.
Yeah. It's a good point, Shane. Service is ours to give. Everything else belongs to God, and we have this to give, so we should have a serious attitude about giving it. Very good. Anybody else? We only have a minute or two, so we're going to stop right there before we jump into questions. A lot of good stuff to talk about when we get into those, so if there's any other things you want to bring up about service and serving, please think on those. I'll do some research about that, Wendell, and we'll take up there next week, or Wednesday, Lord willing. Thank you all.